This is my house.
The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare is a movie directed by Guy Ritchie and is listed as a spy action comedy, and it's based on a real-life event that happened in World War II called Operation Postmaster. In the film, a group of commandos go to enemy territory in West Africa to sabotage German efforts to continue U-boat operations in the Atlantic. The film reminded me a lot of Inglorious. And seriously, YouTube, I can't even say the name of a Quentin Tarantino film without getting whacked in the nuts with a banhammer. They really do not make this easy. I want to say up front that the film itself I did not find to be that bad. It has lots of things I like in it. I like Henry Cavill, I like Alan Ritchson, I like Asa Gonzalez, who a lot of people may not know, but I remember from the From Dusk Till Dawn TV series, and maybe only I do because I'm not actually sure anyone else watched it. The film was entertaining but came with some major problems in it. I liked it and you may like it too, but it left me with some real mixed feelings. I liked some things about it and others I found frankly very upsetting. Firstly, I'm really not that comfortable with people dying being played for laughs, even if they are nasties. It's a story based on the lives of real people. At least it came off as slightly less sadistic than Inglorious did. The film is also very action heavy and doesn't really have any character arcs or development to speak of. It has a lot of scenes of nasties getting mowed down and frankly not that much else. There's a nasty officer played by Till Schweiger, but what the film really needed for me was to build up the bad guys more. Or at all, really. The film spent about 2 seconds showing him to be an evil man, and about 0 seconds showing him to be a competent man or a threat to the good guys. The nasties in this film are unreasonably useless throughout it. We have Henry Cavill playing Major Gus March Phillips, and aren't they like two peas in a pod? The strangely named Hero Finds Tiffin, and yes, that is a real person, playing an Irishman called Henry Hayes, who as far as I can tell, wasn't there in the real events. There was a Graham Hayes who was there, who according to Wikipedia was from Yorkshire, but they can't have British commandos all being from England now, can they? The film is described on Wikipedia as being a, quote, heavily fictionalised version of what happened. In the film, the commandos were aided by 2 British spies, a woman called Marjorie Stewart, who it seems in real life was English and born in London, but in the film is being played by a Mexican actress, Asa Gonzalez. Here is the real woman on her wedding day compared to Asa Gonzalez for contrast. The character in the film also appears to have been rewritten to the extent that in the film they made her half German Jewish. And also, in the real events of the story, it appears she wasn't even there. She wasn't even on the island when the events happened, so we're doing great so far. Hollywood just really likes scenes of Jewish people killing nasties, to the extent that they seemingly have to rewrite the story to put one in. Heavily fictionalised as a description of this film appears to be overly generous, but they needed a woman in there to make it more feminist, and it had to be a woman of colour, so sod actual history, I guess. It was only actual people's lives. It was only the lives of actual war heroes that you're appropriating for your politics. It had the half Malaysian actor Henry Golding playing a character who's maybe supposed to be Spanish called Freddy Alvarez, who I can find no mention of in the actual story. Alan Ritchson is in there playing a Danish man called Anders Larsen, and the weird part of the story is, in the real raid, it does appear Anders Larsen was there. And the real guy sounds almost as crazy as the movie character is. Supposedly the real Anders Larsen actually did try and take on the nasties with a real bow and arrow. So when the LA Times asks, how accurate is the new movie about the real life spies who inspired Bond? Well, it wasn't, was it? They wanted a multicultural coalition of the misfits, and if they had to rewrite history to get it, what's the problem? In the movie, the British commandos gleefully mow down hordes of German nasties like it's Wolfenstein 3D. They're worse than stormtroopers from Star Wars. They drop hundreds of them throughout the course of the film while taking no losses themselves. It's all a glorious romp, and what fun it makes war look. In real life, the events were an awful lot smaller than were depicted in the film, and supposedly the Axis, in the actual raid, lost about 29 men. The sad part for me is that Alan Ritchson is 41 years old now, whereas the real Anders Larsen survived this mission, got promoted to Major, joined the SAS 2nd Battalion, won the Victoria Cross and went to the Italian campaign. where he was killed at age 25. Isn't real war fun? Isn't it a romp? A lot of the people who never went home again on every side were little more than kids. Some were just actual kids. Cavill's character, Gus March Phillips, won the Distinguished Service Order in the real world, married the real-life Marjorie Stewart on May the 6th, 1942, and on the 12th of September 1942 he was part of another raid into German territory called Operation Aquatint, where a group of 11 men landed on the north coast of occupied France. They were fired on by a German patrol and he died. Aged 34, he'd been married for just over 4 months. Graham Hayes, the Yorkshire lad, he got it in the same raid, aged 29. Appleyard in real life probably didn't sound like the character depicted in the film either, with his plummy English accent. In the real world, he was from Leeds, so high likelihood he sounded like Az from Heel vs Babyface.
Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what?
Appleyard died fighting in 1943 in Italy near Sicily, aged 26. And I can turn on the news now and it doesn't appear we've learned much at all. What a complete waste. Most of the rest of the story seems to be about as accurate to what really happened as what I've described so far, so should you watch it? Maybe. It's not a bad film, but I can't help but find it disrespectful. To explain the rest of the problems, I'll have to get into spoilers. The film starts out on a boat. They wanted to start out with some action maybe. A German ship has stopped a fishing boat flying Swedish colours. On that boat is Alan Ritchson and Henry Cavill, and they tried to pretend to be Swedish, and well, I've met quite a few Swedes in my time, and I've never heard one that sounds like Alan Ritchson trying to do a Swedish accent. He sounds like the Swedish chef from the Muppets. The nasty captain is going to do them in, which he kind of didn't ring very true for me. It's not like every German soldier or sailor was just a butcher, and Sweden was technically a neutral party in World War II. The boat, however, is filled with commandos, and they reveal themselves and swiftly dispatch the nasties. One of them has also placed a mine on the underneath of the German boat. This scene is a flash forward, and as far as I can tell, is entirely fictional again. We go back again and Cavill is being taken out of jail, which also seems to be fictional, in order to carry out a raid to disrupt U-boat operations. He selects a team of his own, but one of the men he wants has been captured by the nasties, Appleyard, so they go and rescue him first. He's on one of these Spanish islands, in a scene that's also supposedly fictional. Well, it was supposedly based on a real event, it just didn't happen in this story. They rescue Appleyard and then head to Africa. The spies are going to distract the German garrison while the commandos blow up a supply vessel that's full of supplies for the U-boat fleet. So the half-Jewish lady, who in real life wasn't really half-Jewish as far as I can tell, and wasn't even there, has to charm the evil nasty officer who also wasn't there and never actually existed. Until they have to change plans at the 11th hour because the ship they want to blow up, it turns out, has a newly reinforced hull, and they have to come up with a new plan because the plan of blowing it up isn't going to work anymore. Their new plan is to steal it and hand it over to the British while also blowing up all of the Germans' fuel. And this also seems to have never happened. There was never a change of plan. Their plan was always to steal the ship. In the film, they got help from a local African man played by Danny Sapani, who I quite like. But in the real story, they were actually helped by Sir Bernard Boudillon, the colonial administrator of Nigeria. But we can't have that in 2024, can we? You know, actually accurate history. That'll need to be sanitised for a modern audience. We've kind of gone a bit silly with the representation at this point. Then the half-Jewish lady, who in real life it seems wasn't half-Jewish and wasn't even there, gets caught by the evil nasty when she accidentally says something in Yiddish, and she does in the evil nasty officer who also wasn't really there and never existed. In real life, the mission did face some opposition from some of the British military, but nothing like the opposition they faced from the whole UK government, apart from Winston Churchill in the film. Also, Rory Kinnear didn't really capture Churchill for me. The importance of this one raid also appears to be massively overblown in the film. as in the movie it now allowed America to enter the war and won the Atlantic for the Allies, whereas in the real world the nasties had U-boat facilities dotted over the French and Norwegian coasts, so they maybe hampered U-boat activities by hitting here, but now consider that in the real world, nasties also had U-boat pens in Bordeaux, Brest, La Rochelle, Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, Trondheim and Oslo. So what in some ways was not a bad movie for me really started to become quite uncomfortable. I don't like how much it glorifies war. I liked it even less when I learned what happened to the real men involved, like Anders Larsen. It was like being punched in whatever I have left that passes for a heart when I read what happened to those men. I didn't like when I realised quite how badly they'd butchered the real story in making this film in order to make it fit their politics. At the end of the film, they put up pictures of the real people behind the story and the medals they got. Some more stories of their daring exploits. They, however, left out the part where most of them never saw the end of the war.
You might think everything is okay, but Disney? He's gonna get you. Kathleen Kennedy's gonna get you. Disney and Kathleen Kennedy are gonna get you.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
No, 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 no!